Chapter 15. The First Descent of Beelzebub upon the Planet Earth. Upon that planet Earth, Beelzebub began to relate, I descended for the first time on account of a young being of our tribe who had had the misfortune to become deeply involved with a free-brain being there, as a consequence of which he had got himself mixed up in a very stupid affair. There once came to my house on the planet Mars a number of beings of our tribe, also dwelling there on Mars, with the following request. They told me that one of their young kinsmen, 350 Martian years before, had migrated to exist on the planet Earth, and that a very disagreeable incident for all of us, his kinsmen, had recently occurred to him there. They told me further, we, his kinsmen, both those existing there on the planet Earth and those existing here on the planet Mars, intended at first to deal with the unpleasant incident ourselves with our own resources. But notwithstanding all our efforts and the measures we have adopted, we have been unable so far to accomplish anything. And being now finally convinced that we are unable to settle this unpleasant affair by ourselves independently, we venture to trouble you, your right reverence, and urgently beseech you to be so kind as not to withhold from us your wise advice, how we may find a way out of our unhappy situation. They told me further in detail in what the misfortune which had befallen them consisted. From all they told me, I saw that the incident was disagreeable not only for this young being's kinsman, but that it might also prove disagreeable for the beings of all our tribe. So I could not help deciding at once to undertake to help them to settle this difficulty of theirs. At first I tried to help them while remaining on the planet Mars, but when I became certain that it would be impossible to do anything effective from the planet Mars, I decided to descend to the planet Earth and there, on the spot, to find some way out. The next day, after this decision of mine, I took with me everything necessary which I had at hand and flew there on the ship Occasion. I may remind you that the ship Occasion was the ship on which all the beings of our tribe were transported to that solar system and, as I have already told you, it was left there for the use of the beings of our tribe for the purpose of interplanetary communication. The permanent port of this ship was on the planet Mars, and its supreme direction had been given me from above. Thus it was on this same ship Occasion that I made my first descent to the planet Earth. Our ship landed on this first visit of mine on the shores of just that continent which during the second catastrophe to this planet disappeared entirely from its surface. This continent was called Atlantis, and most of the free-brain beings, and likewise most of the beings of our tribe, then existed only upon it. Having descended, I went straight from the ship Occasion to the city named Samlios, situated on the said continent, where that unfortunate being of our tribe, who was the cause of this descent of mine, had the place of his existence. The city Samlios was then a very large city, and was the capital of the largest community then on the planet Earth. In this same city, the head of this large community existed, who was called King Apollos. And it was with just this same King Apollos that our young, inexperienced countrymen had become involved. And it was in this city of Samlios itself that I learned all the details of this affair. I learned, namely, that before this incident our unfortunate countryman had for some reason been on friendly terms with this King Apollos, and was often at his house. As it transpired, our young countryman once, in the course of conversation during a visit to the house of King Apollos, made a wager, which was just the cause of all that followed. You must first of all know that both the community of which King Apollos was the head and the city of Samlios, where he existed, were at that period the greatest and richest of all the communities and cities then existing on the earth. For the upkeep of all this wealth and grandeur, King Apollos certainly needed both a great deal of what is called money and a great deal of labour from the ordinary beings of that community. It is necessary to premise just here that at the period of my first descent in person onto this planet, the organ Kundabuffer was no longer in the free-brained beings who interest you. And it was only in some of the free-brained beings there that various consequences of the properties of that for them maleficent organ had already begun to be crystallized. In the period to which this tale of mine refers, one of the consequences of the properties of this organ, which had already become thoroughly crystallized in a number of beings there, was that consequence of the property which, while the organ Kundabuffer itself was still functioning in them, had enabled them very easily and without any remorse of conscience not to carry out voluntarily any duties taken upon themselves or given them by a superior. But every duty they fulfilled was fulfilled only from the fear and apprehension of threats and menaces from outside. It was in just this same consequence of this property already thoroughly crystallized in some beings of that period there, that the cause of this whole incident lay. And so, my boy, this is how it was. King Apollos, who had been extremely conscientious in respect of the duties he had taken upon himself for the maintenance of the greatness of the community entrusted to him, had spared neither his own labour nor wealth, and at the same time he demanded the same from all the beings of his community. But, as I have already said, the mentioned consequences of the organ Kundabuffer, having by that time been thoroughly crystallized in certain of his subjects, he had to employ every possible kind of threat and menace in order to extract from everybody all that was required for the greatness of the community entrusted to him. His methods were so varied, and at the same time so reasonable, that even those of his subject beings, in whom the said consequences had already been crystallized, could not help respecting him, although they added to his name, of course behind his back, the nickname Arch-Cunning. And so, my boy, these means by which King Apollos then obtained what was necessary from his subjects for the maintenance of the greatness of the community entrusted to him, seemed to our young countryman, for some reason or other, unjust, and, as it was said, he often became very indignant and restless whenever he happened to hear of some new device of King Apollos for getting what was necessary. And once, while talking with the king himself, our naive young countryman could not restrain himself, but expressed to his face his indignation and his views of this unconscionable conduct of King Apollos towards his subjects. Not only did King Apollos not fly into a temper, as usually happens on the planet Earth when somebody pokes his nose where he has no business, nor did he pitch him out by the scruff of his neck, but he even talked it over with him and discussed the reasons for his severity. They talked a great deal, and the results of the whole of their conversation was precisely a wager. That is to say, they made an agreement and set it down on paper, and each of them signed it with his own blood. Among other things, there was included in this agreement that for the obtaining from his subjects of all that was necessary, King Apollos should be obliged to employ thereafter only those measures and means which should be indicated by our countrymen. And in the event that all his subjects should fail to contribute all that which according to custom was required, then our countryman would become responsible for everything, and he pledged himself to procure for the treasury of King Apollos as much as was necessary for the maintenance and further aggrandizement of the capital and for the whole community. And so, my boy, King Apollos did indeed, from the very next day, fulfil very honourably the obligation which, according to the agreement he had assumed, and he conducted the whole government of the country exactly according to the indications of our young countrymen. The results of a government of this kind, however, very soon proved to be quite the opposite of those expected by our simpleton. The subjects of that community, principally, of course, those in whom the said consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer had already been crystallized, not only ceased to pay into King Apollos' treasury what was required, but they even began gradually snatching back what had been put in before. As our countryman had undertaken to contribute what was needed and, furthermore, had signed his undertaking with his blood, and you know, don't you, what the voluntary undertaking of an obligation, especially when signed with his blood, means to one of our tribe, he had of course soon to begin making up to the treasury all that was short. He first put in everything he had himself, and afterwards everything he could get from his nearest, dwelling also there on the planet Earth. And when he had drained dry his nearest there, he addressed himself for assistance to his nearest dwelling on the planet Mars. But soon on the planet Mars also everything ran dry, and still the treasury of the city of Samlios demanded more and again more, nor was the end of its needs in sight. It was just then that all the kinsmen of this countryman of ours became alarmed, and thereupon they decided to address themselves to me with the request to help them out of their plight. So, my boy, when we arrived in the said city, I was met by all the beings of our tribe, both old and young, who had remained on that planet. In the evening of the same day, a general meeting was called to confer together to find some way out of the situation that had arisen. To this conference of ours there was also invited King Apollos himself, with whom our elder countryman had already previously had many talks on this matter, with this aim in view. At this first general conference of ours, King Apollos, addressing himself to all, said as follows: "Impartial friends, I personally am deeply sorry for what has occurred and what has brought about so many troubles for those assembled here, and I am distressed in all my being that it is beyond my power to extricate you from your prospective difficulties. You must know indeed," King Apollos continued, "that the machinery of the government of my community, which has been wound up and organised during many centuries, is at the present time already radically changed, and to revert to the old order is already impossible without serious consequences, namely, without those consequences which must doubtless evoke the indignation of the majority of my subjects. The present situation is such that I alone am not able to abolish what has been created without provoking the mentioned serious consequences, and I therefore beg you all, in the name of justice, to help me to deal with it. Still further," he then added, "I bitterly reproach myself in the presence of you all, because I also am greatly to blame for all these misfortunes. And I am to blame because I ought to have foreseen what has occurred, since I have existed in these conditions longer than my opponent and your kinsman, namely he with whom I made the agreement known to you. To tell the truth, it was unpardonable of me to risk entering into such conditions with a being who, although he may be of much higher reason than I, is, nevertheless, not so practised in such affairs as I am. Once more I beg all of you, and your right reverence in particular, to forgive me and to help me out of this sad plight, and enable me to find some issue from the situation that has been created. With things as they now are, I can at present do only what you will indicate." After King Apollos had left, we decided the same evening to select from among ourselves several experienced elderly beings who should weigh together that same night all the data and draw up a rough plan for further action. The rest of us then departed on the understanding that we should assemble the ensuing evening at the same place, but to this second conference of ours King Apollos was not invited. When we assembled the next day, one of the elder beings, elected the night before, first reported as follows: "We pondered and deliberated the whole night upon all the details of this lamentable event, and as a result we have unanimously come to the conclusion, first of all, that there is no way out but to revert to the former conditions of government. Further, we all, and also unanimously, agree that to return to the former order of government must inevitably provoke a revolt of the citizens of the community, and, of course, that there will certainly follow all those consequences of revolt which have already become inevitable in such circumstances during recent times on Earth. And of course, as has also become usual here, many of those so-called power-possessing beings of this community will suffer terribly, even possibly to the degree of their complete destruction. And above all, it seemed impossible that King Apollos could escape such a fate. Thereafter, we deliberated in order, if possible, to devise some means of diverting the said unhappy consequences, at least from King Apollos himself. And we had every wish to devise such a means because, at our general conference yesterday evening, King Apollos himself was very frank and friendly towards us, and we should all be extremely sorry if he himself should suffer. During our further prolonged deliberations, we came to the conclusion that it would be possible to divert the blow from King Apollos only if during the said revolt the exhibition of the fury of the rebellious beings of this community was directed not against the king himself, but against those around him, that is, those who were there called his administration. But then the question arose among us, would those near the king be willing to take upon themselves the consequences of all this? And we came to the categorical conclusion that they certainly would not agree, because they would assuredly consider that the king himself had been alone to blame for it all, and that therefore he himself should pay for it. Having come to all these aforesaid conclusions, we finally also unanimously decided as follows. In order at least to save King Apollos from what is inevitably expected, we must, with the consent of the king himself, replace all the beings in this community who now hold responsible posts by beings of our tribe, and each of these latter, during the climax of this psychosis of the masses, must take upon himself a share of the consequences anticipated. When this elected being of ours had finished his report, our opinion was quickly formed, and a unanimous resolution was carried to do just as the elder beings of our tribe had advised. And thereupon, we first sent one of our elder beings to King Apollos to put our plan before him, to which the latter agreed, once more repeating his promise, namely, that he would do everything according to our directions. We then decided to delay no longer, and from the following day to begin to replace all the officials by our own. But after 2 days it turned out that there was not sufficient beings of our tribe dwelling on the planet Earth to replace all the officials of that community, and we therefore immediately sent the occasion back to the planet Mars for our beings there. And meanwhile King Apollos, guided by 2 of our elder beings, began, under different pretexts, replacing various officials by our beings, at first in the capital Samlios itself. And when several days later our ship Occasion arrived from the planet Mars with beings of our tribe, similar replacements were made in the provinces also, and soon everywhere in that community what are called the responsible posts were filled by the beings of our tribe. And when all had been changed in this way, King Apollos, always under the guidance of these elder beings of ours, began the restoration of the former code of regulations for the administration of the community. Almost from the very first days of the restoration of the old code, the effects upon the general psyche of the beings of that community, in whom the consequences of the mentioned property of the maleficent organ Kundabuffer had already been thoroughly crystallized, began, as it was expected, to manifest themselves. Thus the expected discontent grew thereupon from day to day, until one day, not long after, there occurred just that which has ever since been definitely proper to be present in the presence of the free-brained beings there of all ensuing periods, and that is to produce from time to time the process which they themselves nowadays call revolution. And during their revolution of that time, as it has also become proper there to these free-brained phenomena of our great universe, they destroyed a great deal of the property which they had accumulated during centuries. Much of what is called the knowledge which they had attained during centuries also was destroyed and lost forever, and the existence of those other beings similar to themselves, who had already chanced upon the means of freeing themselves from the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer, were also destroyed. It is extremely interesting to notice here one exceedingly astonishing and incomprehensible fact, and that is that during their later revolutions of this kind, almost all the free-brain beings there, or at least the overwhelming majority who begin to fall into such a psychosis, always destroy for some reason or other the existence of just such other beings like themselves, as have, for some reason or other, chanced to find themselves more or less on the track of the means of becoming free from the crystallization in themselves of the consequences of the properties of that maleficent organ Kundabuffer, which unfortunately their ancestors possessed. So, my boy, while the process of this revolution of theirs was running its course, King Apollos himself existed in one of his suburban palaces of the city of Samlios. Nobody laid a finger on him, because our beings had arranged by their propaganda that the whole blame should be placed not upon King Apollos, but upon those surrounding him, that is, as they are called, his administration. Moreover, the beings who had fallen into the said psychosis even suffered grief and really pitied their king, saying that it was because their poor king had been surrounded by such unconscionable and ungrateful subordinates that these undesirable revolutions had occurred. And when the revolutionary psychosis had quite died down, King Apollos returned to the city of Samlios, and again with the help of our older beings, gradually began replacing our countrymen either by those of his old subordinates who were still alive, or by selecting absolutely new ones from among his other subjects. And when the earlier policy of King Apollos towards his subjects had been re-established, then the citizens of this community resumed filling the treasury with money as usual, and carrying out the directions of their king, and the affairs of the community settled again into the former already established tempo. As for our naive, unfortunate countryman, who was the cause of it all, it was so painful to him that he would no longer remain upon that planet that had proved so disastrous for him, but he returned with us to the planet Mars, and later on he became there an even excellent bailiff for all the beings of our tribe. Chapter 16. The Relative Understanding of Time. After a short pause, Beelzebub continued thus. Before telling you further about the free brain beings who have taken your fancy and who breed on the planet Earth, it is in my opinion absolutely necessary for you, for a clear representation of the strangeness of their psyche and, in general, for a better understanding of everything concerning this peculiar planet, first of all, to have an accurate representation of their time calculation, and of how the being sensation of what is called the process of the flow of time in the presences of the free brain beings of that planet has gradually changed, and also of how this process now flows in the presences of the contemporary free brain beings there. It must be made clear to you, because only then will you have the possibility clearly to represent to yourself and understand the events there which I have already related, and those I shall yet relate. You must first know that for the definition of time, the free brain beings of that planet take the year as the basic unit of their time calculation, just as we do, and also like us. They define the duration of their year by the time of a certain movement of their planet in relation to another definite cosmic concentration. That is to say, they take that period in the course of which their planet, during its movement, that is, during the process of falling and catching up, makes what is called its Cretoninian revolution in relation to its sun. It is similar to our reckoning of a year for our planet Karatus, which is the period of time between the nearest approach of the sun Samos to the sun Selos and its next similar approach. 100 of such years of theirs the beings of the earth call a century, and they divide this year of theirs into 12 parts, and each part they call a month. For the definition of the duration of this month of theirs, they take the time of that completed period during which that larger fragment, which was separated from their planet and which they now call moon, makes, owing to the same cosmic law of balling and catching up, its full Cretononian revolution in relation to their planet. It must be noticed that the 12 Cretononian revolutions of the said moon do not correspond exactly to a single Cretononian revolution of their planet round its sun, and therefore they have made some compromise or other when calculating these months of theirs, so that in the sum total these may correspond more or less to reality. Further, they divide these months of theirs into 30 diurnities, or, as they usually say, days. And a diurnity they reckon as that span of time during which their planet makes its completed rotation during the actualizing of the said cosmic laws. Bear in mind, by the way, that they also say it is day, when in the atmosphere of their planet, just as in general on all the other planets on which, as I've already told you, the cosmic process called Ilnosoparnian is actualized, that trog-auto-egocratic process, which we call Geschichtssavakt, periodically proceeds, and they also call this cosmic phenomenon daylight. As regards the other process, the opposite one, which we call Kladax, they call it night, and refer to it as it is dark. And thus the free-brained beings breeding on the planet Earth call the greatest period of the flow of time century, and this century of theirs consists of 100 years. A year has 12 months. A month has an average of 30 days, that is, diurnities. Further, they divide their diurnity into 24 hours, and an hour into 60 minutes, and a minute they divide into 60 seconds. But as in general, my boy, you do not yet know of the exceptional peculiarity of this cosmic phenomenon time. You must first be told that genuine objective science formulates this cosmic phenomenon thus. Time in itself does not exist. There is only the totality of the results ensuing from all the cosmic phenomena present in a given place. Time itself, no being can either understand by reason or sense, by any outer or inner being function. It cannot even be sensed by any gradation or instinct which arises and is present in every more or less independent cosmic concentration. It is possible to judge time only if one compares real cosmic phenomena which proceed in the same place and under the same conditions where time is being constated and considered. It is necessary to notice that in the great universe, all phenomena in general, without exception wherever they arise and manifest, are simply successively law-conformable fractions of some whole phenomenon, which has its prime arising on the most holy Sun Absolute. And in consequence, all cosmic phenomena, wherever they proceed, have a sense of objectivity. And these successively law-conformable fractions are actualized in every respect, and even in the sense of their involution and evolution, owing to the chief cosmic law, the sacred Hector-para-Pashinok. Only time alone has no sense of objectivity, because it is not the result of the fractioning of any definite cosmic phenomena, and it does not issue from anything, but blends always with everything, and becomes self-sufficiently independent. Therefore, in the whole of the universe, it alone can be called and extolled as the ideally unique subjective phenomenon. Thus, my boy, uniquely time alone, or, as it is sometimes called, the higher path, has no source from which its arising should depend, but like divine love, flows always, as I have already told you, independently by itself, and blends proportionately with all the phenomena present in the given place, and in the given arisings of our great universe. Again, I tell you, you will be able clearly to understand all that I have just told you only when, as I have already promised you, I shall specially explain to you some time later all about the fundamental laws of world creation and world maintenance. Meanwhile, remember this also. that since time has no source of its arising, and cannot, like all other cosmic phenomena in every cosmic sphere, establish its exact presence, the already mentioned objective science therefore has, for its examination of time, a standard unit similar to that used for an exact definition of the density and quality, in the sense of the vivifyingness of their vibrations, of all cosmic substances in general, present in every place and in every sphere of our great universe. And for the definition of time, this standard unit has from long ago been the moment of what is called the sacred ego-Kornatsnanian sensation, which always appears in the most holy cosmic individuals dwelling on the most holy Sun Absolute, whenever the vision of our uni-being endlessness is directed into space and directly touches their presences. This standard unit has been established in objective science for the possibility of exactly defining and comparing the differences between the gradations of the processes of the subjective sensations of separate conscious individuals, and also of what are called diverse tempos, among various objective cosmic phenomena which are manifested in various spheres of our great universe, and which actualize all cosmic arisings, both large and small. The chief particularity of the process of the flow of time and the presence of cosmic arisings of various scales consists in this, that all of them perceive it in the same way and in the same sequence. In order that you may meanwhile represent to yourself, if only approximately, what I have just said, let us take an example, the process of the flow of time proceeding in any drop of the water in that decanter standing there on the table. Every drop of water in that decanter is in itself also a whole independent world, a world of microcosmoses. In that little world, as in other cosmoses, there also arise and exist relatively independent, infinitesimal individuals or beings. For the beings of that infinitesimal world also, time flows in the same sequence in which the flow of time is sensed by all individuals in all other cosmoses. These infinitesimal beings also, like the beings of cosmoses of other scales, had their experiences of a definite duration for all their perceptions and manifestations, and, also like them, they sensed the flow of time by the comparison of the duration of the phenomena around them. Exactly like the beings of other cosmoses, they are born, they grow up, they unite and separate for what are called sex results, and they also fall sick and suffer, and ultimately, like everything existing in which objective reason has not become fixed, they are destroyed forever. But the entire process of the existence of these infinitesimal beings of this smallest world, time of a definite proportionate duration, also ensues from all the surrounding phenomena which are manifested in the given cosmic scale. For them also, time of definite length is required for the processes of their arising and formation, as well as for various events in the process of their existence up to their complete final destruction. In the whole cause of the process of existence of the beings of this drop of water also, corresponding sequential definite what are called passages of the flow of time are also required. A definite time is required for their joys and for their sorrows, and, in short, for every other kind of indispensable being experiencing, down to what are called runs of bad luck, and even to periods of thirst for self-perfection. I repeat, among them also the process of the flow of time has its harmonious sequence, and this sequence ensues from the totality of all the phenomena surrounding them. The duration of the process of the flow of time is generally perceived and sensed in the same way by all the aforementioned cosmic individuals, and by the already completely formed what are called instinctivized units, but only with that difference which ensues from the difference in the presences and states at the given moment of these cosmic arisings. It must be noticed, however, my boy, that though for separate individuals existing in any independent cosmic unit, their definition of the flow of time is not objective in the general sense, yet, nevertheless, for them, themselves it acquires a sense of objectivity, since the flow of time is perceived by them according to the completeness of their own presence. The same drop of water which we have taken as an example can serve for a clearer understanding of this thought of mine. Although in the sense of general universal objectivity, the whole period of the process of the flow of time in that same drop of water is for the whole of it subjective, yet for the beings existing in the drop of water itself, the said given flow of time is perceived by them as objective. For the clarification of this, those beings called hypochondriacs can serve, who exist among the free-brain beings of the planet Earth which has taken your fancy. To these terrestrial hypochondriacs, it very often seems that time passes infinitely slowly and long, and as they express themselves, it drags phenomenally tediously. And so, exactly in the same way, it might also sometimes seem to some of the infinitesimal beings existing in that drop of water, assuming of course that there happen to be such hypochondriacs among them, that time drags very slowly and phenomenally tediously. But actually, from the point of view of the sensation of the duration of time by your favourites of the planet Earth, the whole length of the existence of the beings' microcosmoses lasts only a few of their minutes, and sometimes even only a few of their seconds. Now, in order that you may still better understand time and its peculiarities, we may as well compare your age with the corresponding age of a being existing on that planet Earth. And for this comparing of ours, we too must take the same standard unit of time, which, as I have already told you, objective science employs for such calculations. Bear in mind, first of all, that according to the data about which you will also learn when I shall later have specially explained to you the fundamental laws of world creation and world maintenance, it is also established by the same objective science that in general all normal free-brain beings, and amongst them certainly even the beings arising on our planet Karatas, sense the sacred ego-core-natsnanian action for the definition of time 49 times more slowly than the same sacred action is sensed by the sacred individuals dwelling on the most holy Sun Absolute. Consequently, the process of the flow of time for the free brain beings of our Karatas flows 49 times more quickly than on the Sun Absolute, and thus it should flow also for the beings breeding on the planet Earth. And it is also calculated that during the period of time in which the Sun Samos actualizes its nearest approach to the Sun Selos, which period of the flow of time is considered a year for the planet Karatas, the planet Earth actualizes in relation to its Sun Ors 389 of its Crentonanian revolutions. From which it follows that our year, according to the conventionally objective time calculation, is 389 times longer than that period of time which your favourites consider and call their year. It may not be without interest for you to know that all these calculations were partly explained to me by the great arch-engineer of the universe, his measurability Archangel Algamatant. May he be perfected unto the holy Implanted. He explained this to me when, on the occasion of the first great misfortune to this planet Earth, he came to the planet Mars as one of the sacred members of the third most great commission and the captain of the trans-space ship Omnipresent, with whom I had several friendly talks during that journey. Also partly explained it to me during my journey home. Now it must be further noticed that you, as a free-brain being who arose on the planet Karatas, are at the present time still only a boy of 12 years, and in respect of being and of reason, you are exactly like a boy of 12 on the planet Earth, who has not yet been formed, and who is not yet cognizant of himself. through which, being age, all the free-brain beings arising there also live during the process of their growing up to the being of a responsible being. All the features of the whole of your psyche, what are called your character, temperament, inclinations, and in short, all the particularities of your psyche which are manifested exteriorly, are exactly the same as those of a still immature and pliant free-brain being there of the age of 12 years. And so it follows from all that has been said, that according to our time calculations, you are still only like a boy of 12 there on the planet Earth who is not yet formed, and not yet cognizant of himself. Yet according to their subjective understanding, and their being sensations of the flow of time, you have already existed by their time calculation, not 12 years, but the whole of 4,668 years. Thanks to all I have said, you will have material for the clarification of certain of those factors which relate to the cause that the average proper normal duration of their existence began gradually to diminish, and that it has now already become, in the objective sense, almost nothing. Strictly speaking, this gradual diminution of the average length of the existence of the free-brain beings of that ill-fated planet, which has finally brought the whole of the duration of their existence to nothing, did not have one cause, but many and very varied causes. And among these many and varied causes, the first and the chief was, of course, that nature had to adapt herself correspondingly, gradually, to change their presences to those they now have. And concerning all the rest of the causes, justice demands that I should first of all emphasize that on that ill-fated planet, these causes might never have arisen had that first cause not occurred there, from which, at least in my opinion, they all chiefly ensued, though of course very gradually. Concerning all this, you will understand in the course of further talks of mine about these free-brain beings, and meanwhile I will tell you only of the first and chief cause, namely, why and how great nature herself was compelled to take stock of their presence, and to form them into such new presences. You must first be told that there exist in the universe genuinely two kinds, or two principles of the duration of being existence. The first kind, or first principle of being existence, which is called Fall and Snit Amnion, is proper to the existence of all free-brain beings arising on any planet of our great universe, and the fundamental aim and sense of the existence of these beings is that there must proceed through them the transmutation of cosmic substances necessary for what is called the common cosmic trog-auto-egocratic process. And it is according to the second principle of being existence that all one-brained and two-brained beings in general exist wherever they may arise. And the sense and aim of the existence of these beings also consist in this, that there are transmuted through them the cosmic substances required not for purposes of a common cosmic character, but only for that solar system, or even only for that planet alone, in which and upon which these one-brained and two-brained beings arise. In any case, for the further elucidation of the strangeness of the psyche of these free-brained beings who have taken your fancy, you must know this also, that in the beginning, after the organ Kundabuffer with all its properties has been removed from their presences, the duration of their existence was according to the Four-Arsnitarnian principle, that is to say, they were obliged to exist until there was coated in them, and completely perfected by reason, what is called the Bozi-Kezjan, or as they themselves later began to name this being part of theirs, of which, by the way, contemporary beings know only by hearsay, the astral body. And so, my boy, when later, for reasons of which you will learn in the course of my further tales, they began to exist already excessively abnormally, that is to say, quite unbecomingly for free-brained beings, and when in consequence of this they had on the one hand ceased to emanate the vibrations required by nature for the maintenance of the separated fragments of their planet, and on the other hand had begun, owing to the chief peculiarity of their strange psyche, to destroy beings of other forms of their planet, thereby gradually diminishing the number of sources required for this purpose. Then nature herself was compelled gradually to actualize the presences of these free-brain beings according to the second principle, namely the principle autoklanos, that is, to actualize them in the same way in which she actualizes one-brained and two-brained beings, in order that the equilibrium of the vibrations required according to quality and quantity should be attained. As regards the meaning of the principle autoklanos, I shall also specially explain it to you sometime. And meanwhile, remember that although the fundamental motives for the diminution of the duration of the existence of the free-brain beings of this planet were from causes not depending on them, yet, nevertheless, subsequently, the main grounds for all the sad results were, and particularly now continue to be, the abnormal conditions of external ordinary being existence establishing by them themselves. Owing to these conditions, the duration of their existence has, down to the present time, continued to become shorter and shorter, and now is already diminished to such a degree that, at the present time, the difference between the duration of the process of the existence of the free-brain beings of other planets in the whole of the universe and the duration of the process of the existence of the free-brain beings of the planet Earth has become the same as the difference between the real duration of their existence and the duration of the existence of the infinitesimal beings in that drop of water we took as an example. You now understand, my boy, that even the most great hieropath of time has also been compelled to actualize obvious absurdities in the presences of these unfortunate free-brain beings who arise and exist on this ill-fated planet Earth. And thanks to all I've just explained to you, you can put yourself in the position of and understand the, although merciless, yet always and in everything just hieropaths. Having said these last words, Beelzebub became silent, and when he again spoke to his grandson, he said with a heavy sigh, "Heek, my dear boy, later, when I shall have told you more about the free-brain beings of that ill-fated planet, you yourself will understand and form your own opinion about everything. You yourself will very well understand that although the fundamental causes of the whole chaos that now reigns on that ill-fated planet Earth were certain unforeseeingness coming from above on the part of various sacred individuals, yet nevertheless the chief causes for the developing of further ills are only those abnormal conditions of ordinary being existence, which they themselves gradually established, and which they continue established down to the present time. In any case, my dear boy, when you learn more about these favourites of yours, not only, I repeat, will you clearly see how pitiably small the duration of the existence of these unfortunates has gradually become in comparison with that normal duration of existence which has already long ago been established as a law for every kind of free-centred being of the whole of our universe, but you will also understand that in these unfortunates, for the same reason, there has gradually begun to disappear, and at the present time are quite absent in them, any normal being sensations whatever concerning any cosmic phenomenon. Although the beings of that ill-fated planet arose according to conventionally objective time reckoning many decades ago, not only have they not as yet any being sensation of cosmic phenomena such as is proper to all free-centred beings of the whole of our universe to have, but there is not in the reason of these unfortunates even an approximate representation of the genuine causes of these phenomena. They have not an approximately correct representation even of those cosmic phenomena that proceed on their own planet round about them.
Chapter 17. The Arch-Absurd. According to the assertion of Beelzebub, our sun neither lights nor heats. In order, my dear Hussein, that you should meanwhile have an approximate representation also of just how far that function called the instinctive sensing of reality, which is proper to every free-brain being of the whole of our great universe, is already entirely lacking in the presences of the free-centred beings breeding on the planet Earth, and especially in those of the most recent periods. It will be enough to begin with, I think, if I explain to you only about how they understand and explain to themselves the causes why they periodically proceed on their planet those cosmic phenomena which they call daylight, darkness, heat, cold, and so on. All, without exception, of the free-brain beings of that planet who have attained the age of a responsible being, and even those many and various wiseacrings existing there, which they call sciences, are categorically certain that all the said phenomena arrive on their planet completely, so to say, ready-made, DIRECTLY, from their own sun. And as Mullah Nasir Eddin would say in such cases, no more hokey-pokey about it. What is most peculiar in this case is that, except for certain beings who existed before the second Translepanian perforation, there absolutely no doubt whatever concerning their certainty of theirs has ever as yet crept into a single one of them. Not only has not a single one of them, having a reason which, though strange, has nevertheless some resemblance to sane logic, ever yet doubted the causes of the said phenomena, but not a single one of them has manifested concerning these cosmic phenomena even that strange special property of their common psyche, which also became proper to the free-brain beings of that planet alone, and which is called to fantasy. Having said these last words, Beelzebub, after a little while, with a bitter smile, continued to talk as follows. You, for instance, have the normal presence of a free-brain being, and within your presence there is intentionally implanted from without Auskey, or as they say there on the earth, education, which is founded on a morality based solely on the commandments and indications of the uni-being himself and the most holy individuals near to him. And yet, if you should chance to be there among them, you should be unable to prevent the process in yourself of the being nurtrigal, that is, the process which, again there on the earth, is called irrepressible inner laughter. That is to say, you would not be able to restrain yourself from such laughter, if in some way or another they were suddenly clearly to sense and understand, without any doubt whatever, that not only does nothing like light, darkness, heat, and so on come to their planet from their sun itself, but that their supposed source of heat and light is itself almost always freezing cold, like the hairless dog of our highly esteemed Mullah Nasir Eddin. In reality, the surface of their source of heat, like that of all the ordinary suns of our great universe, is perhaps more covered with ice than the surface of what they call their North Pole. Surely this Hearth of heat itself would rather borrow heat, if only a little, from some source of cosmic substance, than send a part of its own heat to any other planet, especially to that planet which, though it belongs to its system, yet in consequence of the splitting off from it of a whole side, became a lopsided monstrosity, and is now already a source of offensive shame for that poor system Ours. But do you yourself know, my boy, in general how and why, in the atmosphere of certain planets, during trog-auto-egocratic processes, there proceed those kitschstarts, bots, klitsch, tainolair, pashachikar, and other such phenomena, which your favourites call daylight, darkness, cold, heat, and so on? Beelzebub asked Hussein. If you don't clearly understand, I shall explain this also to you a little. Although I have promised to explain to you, only later, all the fundamental laws of world creation and world maintenance in detail, yet the necessity here has arisen to touch upon, if only briefly, the questions concerning these cosmic laws, without waiting for that special talk I promised. And this is necessary in order that you may be able better to take in all that we are now talking about, and also in order that what I have already told you may be transubstantiated in you in the right way. It is necessary to say, first of all, that everything in the universe, both the intentionally created and the later automatically arisen, exists and is maintained exclusively on the basis of what is called the common cosmic trog-auto-egocratic process. This most great common cosmic trog-auto-egocratic process was actualized by our endless uni-being when our most great and most holy Son Absolute had already existed, on which our all-glorious, endless Creator had and still has the chief place of his existence. This system, which maintains everything arisen and existing, was actualized by our endless Creator in order that what is called the exchange of substances, or the reciprocal feeding of everything that exists, might proceed in the universe, and thereby that the merciless hieropath might not have its maleficent effect on the Son Absolute. This same most great common cosmic trog-auto-egocratic process is actualized always and in everything on the basis of the two fundamental cosmic laws, the first of which is called the fundamental first-degree sacred heptaparapashinok, and the second, the fundamental first-degree sacred triamazikamno. Owing to these two fundamental sacred cosmic laws, there arise first from the substance called epheroquilno, under certain conditions, what are called crystallizations, and from these crystallizations, but later, and also under certain conditions, there are formed various large and small, more or less independent, cosmic definite formations. It is just within and upon these cosmic definite formations that the processes of what are called the involution and evolution of the already formed concentrations and also of the said crystallizations take place. Of course, also according to the two said fundamental sacred laws, and all the results obtained from these processes in atmospheres and further by means of these atmospheres themselves blend and go for the actualizing of the said exchange of matters for the purposes of the most great common cosmic trog-auto-egocrat. Epheroquilno is that prime source substance with which the universe is filled, and which is the basis for the arising and maintenance of everything existing. Not only is this epheroquilno the basis for the arising of all cosmic concentrations without exception, both large and small, but also all cosmic phenomena in general proceed during some transformation in this same fundamental cosmic substance, as well as during the processes of the involution and evolution of various crystallizations, or as your favourites say, of those active elements which have obtained and still continue to obtain their prime arising from this same fundamental prime source cosmic substance. Bear in mind here that it is just because of this that the mentioned objective science says that everything without exception in the universe is material. You must also know further that only one cosmic crystallization, existing under the name omnipresent Okie-Doke, obtains its prime arising, although it also is crystallized from epheroquilno, from the three holy sources of the sacred Theomertamalagos, that is, from the emanation of the most holy Son Absolute. Everywhere in the universe, this omnipresent Okie-Doke, or omnipresent active element, takes part in the formation of all both great and small arisings, and is, in general, the fundamental cause of most of the cosmic phenomena, and, in particular, of the phenomena proceeding in the atmospheres. In order that you may be able to understand, at least approximately concerning this omnipresent Okie-Doke also, I must tell you, first of all, that the second fundamental cosmic law, the sacred triamazikamno, consists of three independent forces, that is to say, This sacred law manifests in everything, without exception, and everywhere in the universe, in three separate, independent aspects. And these three aspects exist in the universe under the following denominations. The first, under the denomination, the holy affirming. The second, the holy denying. And the third, the holy reconciling. And this is also why, concerning this sacred law and its three independent forces, the said objective science has, among its formulations, specially concerning this sacred law, the following: a law which always flows into a consequence and becomes the cause of subsequent consequences, and always functions by three independent and quite opposite characteristic manifestations, latent within it, in properties neither seen nor sensed. Our sacred Theomerta Malagos, also, that is the prime emanation of our most holy Son Absolute, acquires just this same lawfulness as its prime arising, and during its further actualizations gives results in accordance with it. And so, my boy, the omnipresent Okie-Doke obtains its prime arising in space outside of the most holy Son Absolute itself, from the blending of these three independent forces into one, and during its further involutions it is correspondingly changed in respect of what is called the vivifyingness of vibrations, according to its passage through what are called the stoppinders or gravity centres of the fundamental common cosmic sacred heptaparapashinok. I repeat, among the number of other already definite cosmic crystallizations, the omnipresent Okie-Doke unfailingly always participates in both large and small cosmic formations, wherever and under whatever external surrounding conditions they may arise in the universe. This common cosmic unique crystallization, or active element, has several peculiarities proper to this element alone, and it is chiefly owing to these peculiarities proper to it that the majority of cosmic phenomena proceed, including, among other things, the said phenomena that take place in the atmosphere of certain planets. Of these peculiarities proper to the omnipresent active element alone, there are several, but it is enough for the theme of our talk if we become acquainted just with two of them. The first peculiarity is that when a new cosmic unit is being concentrated, then the omnipresent active element does not blend as a whole with such a new arising, nor is it transformed as a whole in any definite corresponding place, as happens with every other cosmic crystallization in all the said cosmic formations. But immediately on entering as a whole into any cosmic unit, there immediately occurs in it what is called Jarchklom, that is to say, it is dispersed into the three fundamental sources from which it obtained its prime arising, and only then do these sources, each separately, give the beginning for an independent concentration of three separate corresponding formations within the given cosmic unit. And in this way, this omnipresent active element actualizes at the outset, in every such new arising, the sources for the possible manifestation of its own sacred law of Triamazikamno. It must without fail be noticed also that in every cosmic formation, the said separated sources, both for the perception and for the further utilization of this property of the omnipresent active element for the purpose of the corresponding actualizing, exist and continue to have the possibility of functioning as long as the given cosmic unit exists. And only after the said cosmic unit has been completely destroyed do these holy sources of the sacred Triamazikamno, localized in the omnipresent active element Okie-Doke, reblend, and they are again transformed into Okie-Doke, but having now another quality of vivifyingness of vibrations. As regards the second peculiarity of the omnipresent Okie-Doke, equally proper to it alone, and which it is also necessary for us to elucidate just now for the given theme of our talk. You will be able to understand about that only if you know something concerning one fundamental cosmic second-degree law existing in the universe under the denomination of the sacred Aiaiaiua. And this cosmic law is that there proceeds within every arising, large and small, when in direct touch with the emanations either of the Sun Absolute itself or of any other sun, what is called remorse. That is, a process when every part that has arisen from the results of any one holy source of the sacred Triamazakamno, as it were, revolts and criticizes the former unbecoming perceptions and the manifestations at the moment of another part of its whole, a part obtained from the results of another holy source of the same fundamental sacred cosmic law of Triamazakamno. And this sacred process, Aiaiaiua, or remorse, always proceeds with the omnipresent active element Okie-Doke also. The peculiarity of this latter during this sacred process is that while the direct action either of the sacred Theomertmalogos or the emanation of any ordinary sun is round about the whole of its presence, this active element is dispersed into its three prime parts, which then exist almost independently, and when the said direct action ceases, these parts blend again and then continue to exist as a whole. Here you might as well, I think, be told, by the way, about an interesting fact I noticed, which occurred in the history of their existence concerning the strangeness of the psyche of the ordinary free-brain beings of that planet which has taken your fancy, in respect of what they call their scientific speculations. And that is, that during the period of my many-centuried observation and study of their psyche, I had occasion to constate several times that though science appeared among them almost from the very beginning of their arising, and, it may be said, periodically, like everything else there, rose to a more or less high degree of perfection, and that, though during these and other periods many millions of free-brained beings called their scientists must have arisen and been again destroyed, yet with the single exception of a certain Chinese man named Chun-Kil-Tez, about whom I shall tell you later in detail, not once has the thought entered the head of a single one of them there that between these two cosmic phenomena, which they call emanation and radiation, there is any difference whatever. Not a single one of those sorry scientists has ever thought that the difference between these two cosmic processes is just about the same as that which the highly esteemed Mullah Nasir Idin once expressed in the following words. They are as much alike as the beard of the famous English Shakespeare and the no less famous French almanac. For the further clarification of the phenomena taking place in the atmospheres, and concerning the omnipresent active element in general, you must know and remember this also, that during the periods when, owing to the sacred process Aiaiaiua, Jarchklom proceeds in the Okie-Doke, then there is temporarily released from it the proportion of the pure, that is, absolutely unblended, Ephrochrono, which unfailingly enters into all cosmic formations and there serves, as it were, for connecting all the active elements of these formations, and afterwards, when its three fundamental parts reblend, then the said proportion of Ephrochrono is re-established. Now it is necessary to touch also, of course, again only briefly, on another question, namely, what relation the omnipresent active element Okie-Doke has to the common presence of beings of every kind, and what are the cosmic results actualized owing to it. It is chiefly necessary to touch upon this question, because you will then have still another very striking and illuminating fact for the better understanding of the difference between the various brain systems of beings, namely the systems called one-brained, two-brained and three-brained. Note first that, in general, every such cosmic formation called brain receives its formation from those crystallizations, the affirming source for whose arising, according to the sacred Trio-Mazi Kamno, is one or another of the corresponding holy forces of the fundamental sacred Trio-Mazi Kamno, localized in the omnipresent Okie-Doke, and the further actualizings of the same holy forces proceed by means of the presence of the beings just through those localizations. I shall sometime in the future specially explain to you about the process itself of the arising of these corresponding being brains in the presences of beings, but meanwhile let us talk, though not in detail, about the results the omnipresent Okie-Doke actualizes by means of these being brains. The omnipresent active element Okie-Doke enters into the presences of beings through all the three kinds of being food. And this proceeds because, as I have already told you, this same Okie-Doke obligatorily participates in the formation of all kinds of products which serve as all three being foods, and is always contained in the presence of these products. And so, my boy, the chief peculiarity of the omnipresent Okie-Doke in the given case is that the process of Gurdjieff proceeds in it within the presence of every being also, but not from being in contact with the emanations of any large cosmic concentration, but the factors for this process in the presences of beings are either the results of the conscious processes of part dog duty on the part of the beings themselves, about which processes I shall also explain to you in detail later, or of that process of great nature herself which exists in the universe under the name Categorically actualization, which process means the obtaining of the required totality of vibrations by adaptation. This latter process proceeds in beings absolutely without the participation of their consciousness. In both cases, when Okie-Doke enters into the presence of a being, and the process of Gurdjieff proceeds in it, then each of its fundamental parts blends with those perceptions which correspond with it according to what is called kindred vibrations, and which are present in the being at the moment, and further, these parts are concentrated upon the corresponding localization, that is, upon the corresponding brain, and these blendings are called being impulsacry. It is necessary to notice further that these localizations, or brains in beings, serve not only as apparatuses for the transformation of corresponding cosmic substances for the purposes of the most great common cosmic trog-auto-ego-crat, but also as the means for beings whereby their conscious self-perfecting is possible. This latter aim depends upon the quality of the presence of the being impulsacry concentrated, or as is otherwise said, deposited upon the said corresponding being brains. Concerning the qualities of being impulsacry, there is among the direct commandments of our all-embracing endlessness even a special commandment which is very strictly carried out by all free-brain beings of our great universe, and which is expressed in the following words: always guard against such perceptions as may soil the purity of your brains. Free-brain beings have the possibility personally to perfect themselves, because in them there are localized free centers of their common presence or free brains, upon which afterwards, when the process of Gurdjieff proceeds in the omnipresent Okie-Doke, the free holy forces of the sacred Trio-Mazi Kamno are deposited and acquire the possibility for their further, this time, independent actualizings. Just in this is the point that the beings having this free brain system can, by the conscious and intentional fulfilling of being part dog duty, utilize from this process of Gurdjieff in the omnipresent Okie-Doke its free holy forces for their own presences, and bring their presences to what is called the secronal arzenicanian state. That is to say, they can become such individuals as have their own sacred law of trio-mazi-kamno, and thereby the possibility of consciously taking in and coating in their common presence all that holy which, incidentally, also aids the actualizing of the functioning in these cosmic units of objective or divine reason. But the great terror of it, my boy, lies just in this, that although in those free-brain beings who have interested you and who breed on the planet Earth, there arise and are present in them, up to the time of their complete destruction, these free independent localizations or free being brains, through which separately all the free holy forces of the sacred trio-mazi-kamno, which they might also utilize for their own self-perfecting, are transformed and go for further corresponding actualizations, yet chiefly on account of the irregular conditions of ordinary being existence established by them themselves, these possibilities beat their wings in vain. It is interesting to note that the said being brains are found in the same parts of the planetary body of these free brain beings who arise on the planet Earth as in us, namely, 1. The brain, predetermined by great nature for the concentration and further actualizing of the first holy force of the sacred trio-mazi-kamno, called the holy affirming, is localized and found in the head. 2. The second brain, which transforms and crystallizes the second holy force of the sacred trio-mazi-kamno, namely the holy denying, is placed in their common presences, also as in us, along the whole of their back in what is called the spinal column. 3. But as regards the place of concentration and source for the further manifestation of the third holy force of the sacred trio-mazi-kamno, namely the holy reconciling, the exterior form of this being brain in the free brain being there bears no resemblance whatever to ours. It must be remarked that in the primordial free brain beings there, this said being brain was localized in the same part of their planetary body as in us, and had an exterior form exactly similar to our own, but for many reasons which you will be able to understand for yourself during the course of my further talks, great nature was compelled, little by little, to regenerate this brain and to give it the form which it now has in the contemporary beings. This being brain in the contemporary free brain beings there is not localized in one common mass, as is proper to the presences of all the other free brain beings of our great universe, but is localized in parts according to what is called specific functioning, and each such part is localized in a different place of their whole planetary body. But although, in its exterior form, this being centre of theirs has now variously placed concentrations, nevertheless, all its separate functionings are correspondingly connected with each other, so that the sum total of these scattered parts can function exactly as in general it is proper for it to function. They themselves call these separate localizations in their common presence nerve nodes. It is interesting to notice that most of the separate parts of this being brain are localized in them, just in that place of their planetary body where such a normal being brain should be, namely in the region of their breast, and the totality of these nerve nodes in their breast they call the solar plexus. And so, my boy, the process of Jarchklum in the omnipresent Okie-Doke proceeds in the presence of each of these favourites of yours, and in them also all its free holy forces are blended independently with other cosmic crystallizations, and go for the corresponding actualizations. But as, chiefly owing to the already mentioned abnormal conditions of being existence gradually established by them themselves, they have entirely ceased to fulfil being part dog duty, then, in consequence of this, none of these holy sources of everything existing, with the exception of the denying source alone, is transubstantiated for their own presences. The crystallizations arising in their presences from the first and from the third holy forces go almost entirely for the service only of the common cosmic trog auto-ego-cratic process, while for the coating of their own presences there are only the crystallizations of the second part of the omnipresent Okie-Doke, namely of the holy denying. And hence it is that the majority of them remain with presences consisting of the planetary body alone, and thus are for themselves destroyed forever. As regards all the peculiarities proper to the omnipresent, everywhere penetrating active element Okie-Doke alone, and also as regards the further results which these peculiarities actualize, you will have a complete representation of them only after I shall have explained to you, in more or less detail, as I have already promised, about the fundamental laws of world creation and world maintenance. But meanwhile, I shall tell you about those elucidating experiments concerning this omnipresent cosmic crystallization, at which I was personally present. But I must tell you that I was an eyewitness of these said elucidating experiments, not on that planet Earth which has taken your fancy, nor did your favourites make them, but on the planet Saturn, where they were made by that free-brain being who during almost the whole period of my exile in that solar system was my real friend, about whom I recently promised to tell you a little more in detail.